The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a pale glow over the sterile corridors of St. Mercy Hospital. It was past midnight, and the usual chaos of the day had settled into an eerie quiet, punctuated only by the occasional beep of monitors or the distant hum of footsteps echoing down the hallways. Clara adjusted her scrubs as she glanced at the clock. 2:47 a.m. Another long shift stretched ahead of her, but exhaustion wasn't something she allowed herself to dwell on. Clara Martinez had always been the kind of person who put others first. At 32, she'd spent nearly a decade working in underfunded hospitals like this one, where resources were scarce, but compassion was abundant, at least from some corners. She didn't mind the late nights or the endless stream of patients. What weighed on her most was seeing people abandoned by those they loved. Tonight was no different. Earlier that evening, an elderly woman named Evelyn Grant had been brought in by paramedics after collapsing outside her apartment building. Her frail frame spoke of years of neglect, both physical and emotional. There were no family members waiting anxiously in the lobby, no calls asking for updates on her condition, just silence. As Clara reviewed Evelyn's chart, she noticed a few details that hinted at a life once full of privilege. Expensive jewelry still clung to Evelyn's wrists despite her disheveled appearance, and her handbag, though worn, bore the logo of a high-end designer brand. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the fact that Evelyn was alone and scared. "Mrs. Grant," Clara said gently, approaching the bed. "I'm Nurse Clara. You're safe here." Evelyn blinked slowly, her cloudy eyes struggling to focus. "Safe," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "But where is he?" "He?" Clara asked softly, leaning closer. Before Evelyn could respond, her eyelids fluttered shut again, leaving Clara wondering who, or what, she meant. By midnight, the hospital staff grew thin. Most nurses had gone home, leaving Clara as one of the few remaining. Knowing Evelyn couldn't be left unattended, Clara made a decision without hesitation. She pulled up a chair beside the bed, determined to stay until help arrived, or until dawn broke through the windows. Little did Clara know, this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events neither she nor Evelyn could have imagined. The hours passed slowly in the dimly lit room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of Evelyn's heart monitor. Clara sat quietly beside her, occasionally checking her vitals but mostly just keeping watch. Despite her exhaustion, there was something about Evelyn that tugged at Clara's heart. A quiet dignity beneath the frailty, a sense of resilience even in her weakest moments. Around 4 a.m., Evelyn stirred again. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting Clara's warm gaze. For a moment, she seemed disoriented. Then recognition dawned. "You stayed," she whispered hoarsely, her voice tinged with surprise. "Of course I did," Clara replied with a soft smile. "It's my job to make sure you're okay." Evelyn managed a faint nod, though her expression remained distant. After a pause, she murmured, "Not many people stay these days." Clara hesitated before responding. There was so much unsaid in those words. Loneliness, regret, perhaps even abandonment. Instead of prying, she reached out and gently adjusted the blanket covering Evelyn's legs. "Well, I'm here now, and I'll stay as long as you need me." That simple reassurance seemed to ease some of the tension in Evelyn's face. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, this time with a hint of curiosity. "What's your name?" "Clara," she said. "And yours is Evelyn, right?" "Yes." Evelyn's voice trailed off, but after another moment, she continued, "Evelyn Grant." She paused, almost as if testing whether the name meant anything to Clara. When no reaction came, she added softly, "Once upon a time, people knew who I was." Clara tilted her head slightly, intrigued but careful not to push too hard. "Were you famous or something?" A weak chuckle escaped Evelyn's lips. "No, nothing like that. My son, he made a name for himself. But I suppose that doesn't matter anymore." Her tone carried a weight of sadness that Clara couldn't ignore. She leaned forward slightly, her instincts telling her that Evelyn needed someone to listen, even if only for tonight. "Do you want to talk about him?" Clara asked gently. For a moment, Evelyn didn't answer. Then, in halting sentences, she began to speak. She talked about her son, Ethan, who had always been brilliant but fiercely independent. How proud she'd been when he founded his tech company. How devastated she felt when their relationship grew strained over the years. Work consumed him, leaving little room for family, or so it seemed. He stopped visiting, Evelyn admitted, her voice trembling. Stopped calling. I thought, maybe he blamed me for something. Or maybe he just forgot. Clara swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to reassure Evelyn, to tell her that things would work out somehow. But she knew better than to make promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she offered what she could: presence. Well, I'm here now, Clara said firmly. And I promise I won't forget you. Evelyn's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she smiled faintly. Thank you, Clara. You remind me of someone who used to care. As the night wore on, their conversations became less frequent but no less meaningful. Clara read excerpts from a book of poems she found tucked into a drawer, its pages yellowed with age. Evelyn listened intently, occasionally offering comments about how certain lines reminded her of her youth, of art galleries, classical concerts, and summers spent painting landscapes. Through these fleeting glimpses, Clara pieced together a picture of Evelyn's life, one filled with beauty and culture, but also marked by loss and longing. It wasn't difficult to see why Evelyn clung to these memories. They were all she had left. By sunrise, Clara realized something profound. Despite the vast differences in their lives, she and Evelyn shared a common thread. Both women understood what it meant to feel invisible, overlooked by a world that often prioritized other things. Yet in this quiet hospital room, they had found a connection neither expected, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, kindness could bridge any gap. High above the city skyline, in a sleek penthouse office bathed in natural light, Ethan Grant stared blankly at the wall of screens displaying real-time data from his global tech empire. At 45, he was a man who thrived on precision, logic, and control, a genius whose innovations had reshaped industries. But today, none of that mattered. His phone buzzed insistently on the glass desk, breaking the silence. He glanced at it briefly before answering. It was his assistant, Melanie. Mr. Grant, she began hesitantly. I've been trying to reach you about your mother. Ethan froze, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. The mention of his mother always stirred emotions he preferred to suppress. Guilt, regret, frustration. For years, he'd convinced himself that their strained relationship was her fault, not his. Work had simply demanded too much of him. There hadn't been time for anything else. What about her? He asked curtly, his voice devoid of warmth. She was admitted to St. Mercy Hospital last night, Melanie explained. Apparently, she collapsed outside her apartment. There's more. It seems no one stayed with her except for a single nurse who volunteered to keep watch overnight. Ethan frowned, irritation flickering across his face. Why wasn't I informed sooner? I only found out this morning, Melanie replied apologetically. The hospital staff didn't realize who she was until they reviewed her records. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. He hated surprises, especially ones involving his mother. Still, something about Melanie's tone caught his attention, the way she emphasized the word volunteered. Tell me more about this nurse, he said after a pause. Melanie hesitated, unsure how much detail to share. Her name is Clara Martinez. From what I gathered, she worked overtime despite being understaffed. She stayed with your mother all night, ensuring she wasn't alone. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. A stranger, a nurse, had done what he hadn't, shown up for his mother when she needed someone most. The thought gnawed at him, stirring an uncomfortable mix of shame and curiosity. I want to meet her, he declared abruptly, and arrange for my mother's care to be transferred to a private facility immediately. Yes, sir, Melanie replied quickly. I'll handle everything. Later that day, Ethan arrived at St. Mercy Hospital, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and authority. As he strode through the halls, nurses and doctors turned their heads, whispering quietly among themselves. Few recognized him, but those who did couldn't help but stare at the billionaire, walking among them like an alien in a foreign land. When he reached Evelyn's room, he paused outside the door, steeling himself for the inevitable confrontation. Pushing it open, he stepped inside and stopped short. Clara was sitting beside Evelyn's bed, holding her hand as she spoke softly. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her dark hair pulled back into a loose bun, and her posture betrayed signs of fatigue. Yet there was an undeniable warmth in her demeanor, a kindness that radiated even without words. Evelyn looked up weakly at the sound of footsteps. When she saw Ethan, her eyes widened in shock. "Ethan," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You came." For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, unprepared for the raw emotion in her voice, or the pang of guilt that hit him square in the chest. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mother, I heard what happened." Before Evelyn could respond, Clara rose from her seat, offering a polite smile. "Mr. Grant, I presume?" she said calmly, extending a hand. "I'm Clara Martinez, your mother's nurse." Ethan shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip despite her apparent weariness. Up close, he noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands, signs of someone who had pushed herself far beyond her limits. "Thank you for staying with her," he said stiffly, though his tone lacked its usual edge. "Not many people would have done that." "It's my job," Clara replied simply, shrugging off his gratitude. "But honestly, anyone would have done the same." Ethan frowned, unconvinced. In his experience, few people acted out of pure altruism, not in the cutthroat world he inhabited anyway. And yet, here was this woman, seemingly untouched by cynicism or greed, treating his mother with a level of care he hadn't seen in years. As Evelyn drifted back to sleep, Ethan motioned for Clara to follow him into the hallway. Once outside, he turned to her, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "Why did you stay? Really?" Clara blinked, taken aback by the intensity of his question. "Because she needed someone," she answered honestly. "She deserved better than to be left alone." Her words struck a nerve, forcing Ethan to confront the truth he'd avoided for so long. He should have been the one sitting by Evelyn's bedside, not a stranger. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. "I owe you an apology," he admitted gruffly. "And more than that, I owe you thanks." Clara crossed her arms, studying him carefully. Despite his polished exterior, she sensed a vulnerability beneath the surface. A man grappling with regrets he couldn't undo. "You don't owe me anything," she said finally. "Just make sure your mom knows you care. That's all she really wants." Ethan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope, a chance to repair the broken pieces of his life. But as he watched Clara return to Evelyn's side, he realized something else. This nurse, with her quiet strength and unwavering compassion, might hold the key to rediscovering the humanity he'd lost along the way. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Clara Martinez from his mind as he left the hospital later that day. Her words echoed in his head. "Just make sure your mom knows you care." Simple yet profound. They carried a weight far greater than any algorithm or business strategy he'd ever devised. For someone who prided himself on solving complex problems, this one felt insurmountable. How could he possibly fix years of neglect with a single gesture? Determined to understand more, Ethan instructed his assistant, Melanie, to dig deeper into Clara's background. What he discovered astonished him. Clara wasn't just another overworked nurse. She was drowning under student loans, working double shifts to support her family, and still managing to dream of opening a community health clinic for underserved populations. Despite her circumstances, she radiated kindness, a quality Ethan hadn't encountered in years, if ever. The next morning, Ethan returned to the hospital, though not before making arrangements to ensure Evelyn would receive top-tier care moving forward. He found Clara in the cafeteria, sipping weak coffee and picking at a stale muffin. She looked even more exhausted than the day before, but her smile remained warm when she saw him approach. "Mr. Grant," she greeted him, standing up politely. "Is everything okay with your mom?" She's stable, Ethan replied, waving off her concern. That's not why I'm here. Clara raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. Then why are you here? Ethan hesitated, unsure how to articulate what he wanted to say. Finally, he pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for my mother. But after learning more about you, I realize thank you isn't enough. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. You don't need to do anything special, Mr. Grant. I was just doing my job. No, Ethan said firmly, leaning forward. What you did goes beyond a job. You stayed with my mother when no one else would, including me. That kind of compassion. It's rare. And I want to repay you. Clara frowned, suspicion creeping into her expression. Repay me? With what? A chance to change your life, Ethan answered simply. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table toward her. Inside were detailed plans for funding a state-of-the-art community health clinic, the exact project Clara had dreamed of creating. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the documents, disbelief washing over her face. This can't be real. It is, Ethan assured her. Consider it a gift, not just for you, but for everyone whose lives you'll touch because of this clinic. You've inspired me, Clara, more than you know. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, shaking her head. I can't accept this. It's too much. Why not? Ethan challenged gently. You've earned it. Don't let pride stand in the way of something good. Clara opened her mouth to protest further, but the words caught in her throat. How could she refuse such an incredible opportunity? Not only would it allow her to pursue her dreams, but it would also help countless others who desperately needed access to affordable healthcare. Still, the magnitude of Ethan's generosity overwhelmed her. I don't even know what to say, she admitted softly. You don't have to say anything, Ethan replied, his tone softening. Just promise me one thing. Never stop being who you are. The world needs more people like you. For the first time in years, Clara felt seen, not as a cog in a broken system, but as someone capable of making a difference. She nodded slowly, gratitude swelling in her chest. Thank you, Mr. Grant. I won't let you down. As they parted ways, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. For so long, he'd measured success by numbers and achievements, but now he understood that true fulfillment came from connection, from giving back in ways that mattered. And Clara? She walked away with renewed purpose, ready to build something extraordinary. Months passed, and the impact of that fateful night at St. Mercy Hospital began to unfold in ways neither Clara nor Ethan could have anticipated. The community health clinic, named Hope Haven, opened its doors 6 months later in a bustling neighborhood where affordable healthcare had long been scarce. Clara stood proudly outside the building on opening day, watching as families streamed in, eager to receive care they'd once thought out of reach. Inside, the clinic buzzed with activity. Bright murals adorned the walls, donated by local artists inspired by Clara's vision. Volunteers bustled around, offering free screenings, vaccinations, and counseling services. The space was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environments Clara had grown accustomed to in traditional hospitals. Ethan visited frequently, though always discreetly. He preferred to observe from the sidelines, marveling at how seamlessly his financial support translated into tangible change. Each time he saw Clara interacting with patients, her laughter lighting up the room, her hands steady as she treated wounds, he felt a sense of pride unlike anything he'd experienced in his tech empire. But the transformation wasn't limited to Clara's world. Back at Evelyn's private facility, Ethan made a conscious effort to visit his mother regularly. Their conversations started awkwardly, filled with pauses and unspoken regrets. But gradually, they found their rhythm again. Evelyn spoke fondly of Clara, often referring to her as the angel who saved me. She shared stories of her own youth, painting vivid pictures of art galleries and summer gardens, while Ethan listened intently, piecing together fragments of a life he'd nearly forgotten. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together on the patio overlooking the garden, Evelyn turned to him with a wistful smile. "You've changed, Ethan," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes." Ethan chuckled nervously, brushing a hand through his hair. "Maybe I have. Maybe I finally realized what really matters." "And what's that?" Evelyn asked, tilting her head curiously. "People," he replied without hesitation. "Connections. Love." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes, and she reached out to squeeze his hand. "I'm so proud of you, my boy." For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the need to deflect or downplay the compliment. Instead, he smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. His reconciliation with Evelyn wasn't perfect. They still had moments of tension. But it was enough. Enough to heal old wounds and rebuild trust. Meanwhile, Clara continued to thrive in her new role. Hope Haven became more than just a clinic. It became a beacon of hope for the entire community. Stories poured in daily. A single mother receiving treatment for her child's asthma, an elderly man getting fitted for hearing aids he couldn't afford, a teenager finding mental health support during a crisis. Every success story fueled Clara's determination to expand the clinic's reach even further. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Clara received an unexpected visitor. It was Ethan, standing awkwardly at the entrance with a bouquet of flowers in hand. "I thought you might need these," he said with a sheepish grin. Clara laughed, taking the flowers from him. "You realize this is a healthcare clinic, not a romantic dinner date, right?" I know, Ethan replied, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "But seriously, I wanted to check in, see how things are going." "They're going great," Clara said, gesturing for him to follow her inside. As they walked through the halls, she pointed out various areas of the clinic, sharing anecdotes about patients and volunteers alike. Ethan listened intently, clearly impressed by the scope of what she'd accomplished. When they reached her office, Clara paused, turning to face him. "Ethan, I never got the chance to properly thank you for everything. You gave me a gift I'll never be able to repay." "You already have," Ethan countered, his voice sincere. "Watching what you've built here, it reminds me why I wanted to help in the first place. You inspire people, Clara, including me." The sincerity in his words caught her off guard, and for a moment, she struggled to find a response. Finally, she smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Well, if I inspire you half as much as you've inspired me, then maybe we're both doing something right." As they parted ways that evening, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that their paths crossing hadn't been mere coincidence. That night in the hospital, when she chose to stay with Evelyn, had set off a chain reaction that transformed not only her life but countless others. And Ethan? He was no longer the distant billionaire she'd met months ago. He was someone who had rediscovered the value of human connection and was using his resources to make a difference. Years later, Hope Haven had grown into more than just a clinic. It was a cornerstone of the community. Its walls echoed with laughter, tears, and countless stories of lives changed for the better. Clara often stood at the entrance, watching families leave with smiles on their faces, knowing that every small victory was a testament to the power of collective effort. She still worked tirelessly, but now she did so alongside a team of dedicated staff and volunteers who shared her vision. Ethan remained a steadfast supporter, though his involvement evolved over time. He became deeply invested in philanthropy, channeling his wealth into projects aligned with Clara's mission. From funding scholarships for aspiring nurses to launching initiatives aimed at addressing healthcare disparities, he found purpose in giving back. His reputation shifted from that of a cold, calculating tech mogul to someone admired for his humanity and generosity. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred within Evelyn herself. Though her health continued to decline, her final days were filled with love and reconciliation. Ethan visited her daily, reading to her, holding her hand, and sharing memories they'd missed out on creating. On the day she passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by flowers and sunlight streaming through the window, Ethan felt no regret, only gratitude for the time they'd reclaimed. At Evelyn's memorial service, held in a quiet garden overlooking the city, Clara delivered a heartfelt eulogy. "Evelyn taught me something I'll carry with me forever," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. She showed me that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to connect with others, with ourselves, and with the world around us. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to spark a chain reaction. As she spoke, Clara glanced at Ethan, seated among the mourners. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw in his expression the same understanding that had guided her journey. That life's greatest achievements aren't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the lives we touch and the legacies we leave behind. After the service, as guests mingled beneath the shade of towering trees, Ethan approached Clara once more. "Do you think she knew?" he asked quietly. "That she inspired all of this?" Clara smiled, nodding. "I think she did." In her own quiet way, she reminded us both of what truly matters. Ethan returned her smile, feeling a deep sense of closure. For so long, he'd chased success without realizing its true meaning. Now, standing beside Clara, he understood that the ripple effects of kindness, the connections forged, the hearts healed, the futures transformed, were the real measure of a life well lived. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the gathering. As Clara turned to greet another guest, she paused for a moment, reflecting on how far they'd all come since that fateful night in the hospital. One decision, to stay with an abandoned patient, had set off a chain reaction that touched countless lives, including her own. And as the evening breeze rustled the leaves above, carrying whispers of hope and renewal, Clara realized something profound. None of us are ever truly alone. Even in our smallest actions, we are part of something greater, a web of humanity, bound together by compassion, courage, and the enduring belief that goodness will always find its way. The story ends on a hopeful note, reminding readers that kindness, no matter how seemingly insignificant, has the power to create profound change. Whether through Clara's selflessness, Ethan's redemption, or Evelyn's quiet resilience, the narrative underscores the beauty of human connection and the transformative potential within each of us.